This is Greek with David Hutchison. Additional pronouns. This lesson really is nothing more than a vocabulary lesson. We're learning some new pronouns. We're not going to learn any new endings. We're not going to learn much grammar at all. In a sense, it's just a vocab lesson. Now, we'll say, pay attention to accents and breathing marks. I've told you that many times those don't matter and that occasionally they do, and that when they do, I will tell you. Well, this is one of those days when they matter. So please pay attention to accents and breathing marks. So let's look at this interrogative pronoun tis. Tis can mean who, which, what, or why. Notice that this has an accent mark and it's on the first syllable. So this is the interrogative pronoun, a questioning pronoun. Who, question mark, which, question mark, what, question mark, or why, question mark. These endings are third declension endings. Tis, tenos, tinny, tina, tines, tenon, tisi, tinas. And then neuter, ti, tenos, tinny, ti, tina, tenon, tisi, tina. So the masculine and feminine share a form, and the neuter has its own form. So pay attention to the accent mark on the first syllable. There's another word we're going to see momentarily, which looks exactly the same except for the accent mark. So these are third declension endings. Saucian, ace, on, cias, nun, os, e, nun, a, on, si, a. So sigma, os, e, alpha or nu, this one's alpha. Ace, on, si, os. Nun, os, e, nun, a, on, si, a. So third declension endings. A few examples of this word in context. Tis estin he mater mu. Who is my mother? Tenos he ekon haute. Whose image is this? This is the image of whom? That's the genitive form. This is the image of whom? In English we would say, whose image is this? Here's dative. Tini hamoioso tain gineon tautain. To whom or to what? This could be masculine, feminine, or neuter. To whom or to what shall I compare this present generation? Tina zetete. Whom do you seek? You are seeking whom? This is accusative. Here a neuter one. Te erumen. What will we say? And then you can use this word for why when it's the accusative neuter singular form. Te poiete tuta. Why are you doing this? So this is the interrogative pronoun tis. Notice the accent mark and then notice the question mark that you'll almost always see somewhere in the sentence. So speaking of questions, Greek will do something that shows you how the author or speaker is expecting someone to answer the question. If the author or speaker is expecting a yes, they can use ou, or a form of ou, plus the indicative mood. So here we have a form of ou. Uki huios estin Yosef hutas. Is this not Joseph's son? Or this is Joseph's son, isn't it? So we have that negative ou, here it's uki, plus the indicative, and so we're expecting the answer, well yes, it is. If an author is expecting a negative answer, or perhaps even hesitation, instead of using ou, we can use may. So may plus the indicative. This assumes the answer is going to be no. Me pantes glossais lalusen. All do not speak in tongues, do they? So by the word choice, we know whether the author is assuming the question will be answered with a yes or whether the question will be answered with a no. So here in 1 Corinthians, Paul is saying, no, in fact, all do not speak in tongues, because God gives different gifts to different people as he desires. So no single person has all of the gifts. It would be particularly unwise to choose any gift as a sign of salvation when Paul explicitly says everyone doesn't have all of the gifts. So Greek can tell you when the answer is expected to be yes. It can also tell you when the answer is expected to be no. And then it can also ask a question where it doesn't give that signal, either the yes signal or the no signal. That would be a question without one of these two words. So let's look now at this indefinite pronoun tis. It's the exact same form as the pronoun we saw a moment ago, the interrogative pronoun, the questioning pronoun, but this one does not have an accent. Usually there's no accent mark. You see no accent mark here on the paradigm. Now occasionally, very rarely in the New Testament, the last syllable will be accented, not the first like the previous form, but the last syllable. But the majority of the time, it's not going to be accented at all. And when you see this form, it's the indefinite pronoun, which means something like one, or someone, or anyone, a certain one, something. Pos dunatai tis eis elthein. How can one enter? How can anyone enter? How can someone enter? Edamin tina. We saw tina. We saw someone. The indefinite pronoun can also be used like an adjective. Egenita hiereus tis. There was a tis priest, a certain priest. So again, the big key here, you're going to have the exact same form, but most of the time there'll be no accent at all. On the few times where there is an accent, it's accented on the last syllable. Another pronoun, this is the relative pronoun has, he, or ha. This means who, which, that, or what. Now this is not the questioning pronoun like who question mark or which question mark, like which ball was it? But this is the relative pronoun, the story which I am telling you. See, that's a relative pronoun. It's not a questioning pronoun. The story that I am telling you. The tickets that you are going to buy. So this is a relative pronoun, that word who, which, that, or what. The forms of this are very nice. It looks a whole lot like the article. You don't have the tau in front. And then what you do have all throughout this entire paradigm is that rough breathing mark. Has, who, ho, han, hoi, hon, hois, hus. Can't you hear the article back there? Very similar. Hey, hace, hey, hain, hi, hon, heis, has, ha, who, ho, ha, ha, hon, hois, ha. So this is the relative pronoun has, he, ha. It's got a masculine form, a feminine form, a neuter form. So a relative pronoun refers back to something else in the sentence that could actually be in front or behind, but it's referring to something else. We'll call that the antecedent. Since it's referring to something else, it has to agree with that thing, that noun or pronoun. It has to be the same gender, and it has to be the same number. So if it's referring to something that's masculine, then this pronoun would be masculine. If it's referring to something that's singular, then it will be singular. But now its case is dependent on what it's doing in the sentence. So the case changes just depending upon its function. Now when you have a relative pronoun, it would be part of a relative clause. A relative clause is a dependent clause. In other words, it's a clause that cannot stand on its own. It's dependent on the main clause. So here we go. Ha anthropos, has ede ton kurion, estin apostolos. The relative pronoun hos is referring back to ha anthropos. The man who saw the Lord is an apostle. So here it's introducing this relative clause, who saw the Lord. So within that clause, it's the subject of that verb eide. So that's why it's nominative. The man is an apostle. What man? The man who saw the Lord. So now we have one similar structure, but it's accusative because this time it's going to be the object of the verb in the relative clause. Ha anthropos, han edamen, estin apostolos. The man whom we saw is an apostle. The main clause, the man is an apostle. The relative clause is whom we saw. Put it into English word order, subject verb. We saw whom. We saw whom. So that's why it's accusative. It's the direct object of the verb edamen. The man whom we saw is an apostle. Here's one that's dative. Houtas estin ha huiosmu ha agapetas in ho eudakesa. This is my beloved son, in whom eudakesa, I am well pleased. So it's dative because it's the object of the preposition in. In ho means in whom. So in whom I am well pleased. You'll see this relative pronoun hos in some of the major Christological hymns in the New Testament. So if you see what appears to be a hymnic piece, a poetic piece, a very highly structured piece, sometimes the vocabulary will differ from its surrounding context, you may be dealing with a Christological hymn. So we have one in Colossians 1. It begins in verse 15. Hos estin ekon tu theou tu a oratu. Who is the image of the unseen God. Now sometimes you can even translate this relative pronoun simply as a pronoun, he. So some translations may put he is the image of the unseen God. Philippians 2, another hymn. Hos in morphe theou huparkon, uk harpagmon hegesata ta enai isa theo. A lot of vocabulary you've never seen before here. But who, although existing in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. The point here I'm making is that this pronoun introduces this Christological hymn in Philippians 2. Same thing in 1 Timothy 3:16. Hos ephanerothe in sarki. This is a highly structured passage. You have aorist passive verbs, and then you have prepositions, in plus dative. This is an interesting one just to look at for structure and parallelism. So that's the relative pronoun hos, he, or ha. You can combine an indefinite pronoun, tis, and a relative pronoun, hos, put them together, and you can get an indefinite relative pronoun. 96% of these in the New Testament are going to be nominative, so they'll look like this. Hostis, hatis, or hati. Those are the singular forms. In the plural, hoitenes, haitenes, hatena. What happens is each part of this declines. So the hos declines and the tis part declines. But you don't really need to worry about it too much because these are the forms that you're going to see 96% of the time. Hostis, hatis, hati, hoitenes, haitenes, hatena. This means who, whoever, what, or whatever. Now do look at that form hati, the nominative singular form. It's the neuter form. What is different about that than the conjunction hati? Look at it, look above the letters. What is different about that and the conjunction hati that means that or because? They both have a rough breathing mark, but this one has that accent mark. So what does this word mean in context? It basically doesn't really mean anything different than the relative pronoun has. So we see this in 1 John. We announce to you the everlasting life, hatis, which ein proston patera kai ephanerothe hemen. We proclaim to you, we announce to you the everlasting life, which, so it's feminine because it's referring back to zoein, the life which was with the Father and was revealed or was made manifest to us. I like this pronoun allelon. This is the one another pronoun. It's by nature plural, and then it only occurs in the genitive, dative, and accusative. So the genitive plural is allelon, of one another. Dative plural, allelois, to one another. Allelus, accusative, one another, perhaps as a direct object. So we see it, for example, in 1 Thessalonians 5:11, dia parakalete allelus. Therefore, it's that word dia, encourage one another. There it's the accusative direct object. We have a pronoun that means myself, and another one that means yourself, and one that means himself. So autou means myself. In the New Testament, this is only masculine, and it only occurs in the genitive, dative, and accusative singular. So I'm giving you all the forms right there. Autou, auto, auton. This means myself. Se autou, you plus autou, yourself. Se autou, se auto, se auton. And again, just like autou, it's only in the genitive, dative, and accusative singular, and it's only masculine in the New Testament. Now, some Septuagint uses will have some others besides masculine, but this is all you're going to see in the New Testament. Het autou means himself or herself or itself. So this one I'm giving you masculine, feminine, or neuter. Het autou, het aute, het autou. These would be different forms, masculine, feminine, neuter. So this occurs in all genders, and it occurs singular and plural. So it would just run down these normal endings you've already seen. Now this form, het autou, this one does, I suppose we could say, triple duty. It is the first person reflexive pronoun, myself, plural, which is ourselves, yourself, plural, which is yourselves, and himself, plural, which is themselves. So these plural forms could do any of these functions. You just have to pay attention to context, and you'll be able to figure out which one it is. So here we have the singular form, se auton. This is you plus auton, so yourself. Agapeses ton plesion su hos se auton. You will love. This is the future used like a command. You will love, in other words, you must love. You shall love. You shall love your neighbor as se auton, as yourself. Now how about the possessive pronoun my or your or his? Most of the time what we're going to do is just use the normal personal pronoun. A form of ego, a form of autos, a form of su. But they do have a specific possessive pronoun, and when this shows up it's a little bit more emphatic. This is emos or hemeteros for my or our. Sos or humeteros for your. idios for his. These forms act like adjectives. They go in the attributive position, and so that means they're going to agree in case, gender, and number. So here we have one in first attributive position, the modifier noun, the pronoun noun. Parakalo se peri tu emu teknu. I appeal to you about or concerning the my child, the child of me, my child. So by using this emphatic pronoun, Paul can build the case for who Onesimus is. He's my child. Here's one in second attributive position, the noun, the modifier, halagos hasos. So your word, aletheia estin, is truth. Very frequently there we would just see halagos su, your word, but here we have halagos hasos. So all of these words really are just vocabulary words. You're going to memorize some new vocabulary. The endings you've already seen before. The functions you've already seen before. Just some new words to add to your knowledge base. Pay attention to accents when I noted it, and pay attention to breathing marks. And this is not a bad lesson coming at this point of the semester.